What's up, horror community? I'm Stock, and today's video is going to be pretty exciting because it's a ranking video. And ranking videos are the most fun to do. I've only done one so far, Friday the 13th. If you guys haven't seen it, go check it out. It was our first ever video. But today I'll be ranking the Scream franchise. And what makes this even more special for me, guys, is this franchise is my second favorite franchise of all time when it comes to horror. Just losing shy to Halloween, which is my favorite. But if you're talking technical, if you're talking a technical level of what story follows the best continued story without getting sloppy, and like Halloween's got so many different timelines, Scream sticks to one throughout all 5 films, and I think technically it is the best horror franchise of all time, from characters to story to just about everything. There's really not even a bad movie in this franchise, in my opinion, which is very hard to do, especially when it comes to horror. I don't think I could even think of a horror franchise that doesn't have at least one bad apple in it. Even Halloween, like my favorite franchise of all time personally, to me it has tons of bad apples in it. But Scream, I think, is so strong. I don't think there's a single bad movie in it. I just think some are stronger than others, and we're about to find out why. And we're about to find out why I think certain ones rank above others. Keep in mind, guys, it's a very tough list to rank. It is a list for me that could change on any given day when it comes to the lower tiered ones. My number 1 and 2 is solid. That'll never change. And I think my number 3 spot is solid too. But as for 4 and 5, these slots, it can always change. It's a stacked franchise. It's hard to rank. But here we go. As of October of 2022, this is my current list. So let's start at number 5. Scream 4. First things first about this that I really like is this is the first time jump that you'll see in Scream. The first 3 movies were very close together, and this is the one that kind of is like a decade later, and everyone is like at different places in their life. They're way older. So much has changed. So much of the trauma of the first 3 have kind of soaked into their brains, and they're all kind of like more of like veteran roles, which I really dug. Something else Scream 4 brings is a very brutal Ghostface. I think it is till we get to 5, but at the time this was the most brutal Ghostface. There's literally a scene that I think is the bloodiest scene still to this day when it comes to Scream. But when the friend that's in the neighbor's house, and she's upstairs, and Ghostface absolutely destroys her, and there's blood literally painted all over the walls. Everything about Ghostface in costume in Scream 4, super brutal. But let's talk about the Ghostface killers. Let's talk about the killers behind the mask. And we have Jill, we have Charlie. First, I'll touch on Charlie. He's kind of the sidekick. He's the lower role. He compares himself to Randy, the evil version of Randy, but I didn't really care for him for the longest time until this most recent rewatch I did, and I like him more this time. He stood out to me more. Just seems like, obviously showing that he's like the big movie geek and everything like that, which I liked to see a little tribute to Randy in that regard. Not nearly as good as him, but it was nice to see. And just seems like his relationship with Kirby and like their little tiny thing they had going together, which led up to him turning on her and stabbing her and killing her until Scream 6, where she comes back apparently. But those little scenes really stuck out to me, and just everything, even when he was revealed as the killer at the end alongside Jill, and just the stuff he was saying like quotes like, "Oh, come on, get it up, like Billy and Stu," like him literally quoting the original, which was, I really liked that. Those little points stuck out to me. And then we got to talk about Jill, who, even though Scream 4 is my lowest movie in the franchise, she's probably one of the better Ghostface killers, and her motives and everything like that were like super deep. And she does the Sidney relative thing 10 million times better than Roman in Scream 3. I felt so much more. It felt so much more like a family connection that I believed over Scream 3's with Roman and Sidney. But Jill is just absolutely insane, and it was unpredictable, her as the killer. A part of me thought it was her, but seeing how innocent she was throughout the film, and then just how bizarre and batshit she goes at the end, it still throws you off guard. Just everything she did after the reveal was nuts. When she shot her boyfriend and between the legs, and she kills off Charlie without even caring at all, kills off her partner. I know you saw that in 2 as well with Mickey. but she just kills him off, gets rid of him, doesn't care about him. She only cares about herself. And her whole motive of saying how she was tired of always hearing about Sydney, this relative of hers, always getting this fame, this like everyone always talking about her. She's the big star of the family, and Jill wanted to be that. She wanted the fame, she wanted the fans, she wanted the questions, the attention, all of that. That was her motive, and that's what she wanted to do. And she wanted to frame the whole situation where she was the hero who survived this whole massacre. And what she did to make that believable was literally beat up herself, like claw herself, rip out her own hair, jump into the wall, slam into glass tables, everything you could think of. And it was a brutal scene to watch, but it was so good and so different. Scream 4's final act 2 is awesome. So after the whole reveal and everything, the hospital scene at the end, it's so much tension I felt, and it's so good on every character's part. Also on the way to the hospital, Jill was getting all that fame, so everyone was asking her after the killings took place and she was the one survivor. All the paparazzi and all the people were, asking her questions, taking pictures of her, and she was just soaking it up and loving it. This leads into the hospital after. This leads to where Jill thinks she's like the only survivor from that encounter. She thinks Sydney's dead because Sydney knows the truth, but she thought she was dead. So in the hospital, when Jill is all beat up and she's in the bed, she has a conversation with Dewey, and they're talking, and they're just talking through stuff. Dewey thinks that she's the hero too. And there's a part where Jill says to him like, "Oh, what about Sydney?" She brings up Sydney, and Dewey says, "Oh, listen, there might be a chance she's still alive." And just like the face on Jill where she's like, crap, like that's not good for me. Dewey has no idea, and the reason why they cracked this whole thing of Jill being the murderer is because Jill says to Dewey in their conversation, "Oh, maybe I could, write a book with Gail and we could talk about our matching wounds." But there was no way for Jill to know that unless she was working with the whole Ghostface thing. And that when Dewey says to Gail about that, like, "Oh, Jill wants to write a book with you about your matching wounds," Gail knows right away. How does she know that? And then the tension right there, it builds so much, because then Dewey goes like, "Oh crap, she's probably on her way to Sydney's room because I just told her that Sydney is still alive and might have a chance." So while Jill's going into Sydney's room and she's brutal on Sydney, so very painful scenes like where she jams her finger into Sydney's wound and they're just going at it. Dewey has a part where it shows him running down the hallway, and you feel the tension because you're like, oh crap, is she gonna get Sydney? Is she gonna get him? But he eventually gets into the room, Dewey, and then Jill whacks him. He's falling all over the place. It's just a mess. It's chaotic. It's nuts. It's so good. Such a good final act. And then Gail comes into the room. She's got like the gun pointed at her, and then Deputy Hicks comes in the room, and just everything is going nuts, and Jill's controlling everyone in this moment until they finally stall enough time, and Sydney, while Gail is talking to Jill, Sydney pops up behind her, hits clear, kills her right there. Sydney says a little thing after saying, "Don't mess with the original," referring to Dewey, Gail, and Sydney, who have been through it all since the first one. And it ends with this whole shot of Sydney kind of staring at Jill while she was dead. And it was just a very good ending. The final act in Scream 4 really stands out to me. Coming in at number 4 is Scream 3. So this is I think is the most common choice for last place. And I do really like this movie too. I do have a lot of fun with it. I do look past a lot of the gripes that people have with it. And I don't agree with people saying it's a bad movie or a bad installment by any means. But let's talk about it a little bit. So the opening scene, they kill off Cotton Weary, which is a big death. They lead off right with a bang. They have a big death to kick off this movie. And I really like that because it fits Scream. They always have these big ballsy kills, and no one ever feels safe. So for them to start it off with that tension building character that you've known about since the first one, and he's in this life or death situation, it's a great opening. It's a great way to kick you off. And then Cotton has this awesome little fight sequence with Ghostface. To see this character from the original who was framed for murder, seeing him fight Ghostface here was really cool. But sadly, he doesn't survive it. But it's very impactful. It's very impactful opening. And the final words that Ghostface says to him is all you had to tell me, Cotton, is where Sidney was. Now you lose, or something around those lines. And he stabs him right there, and you see this character that you've grown to like a lot through Scream 2, especially the Scream 2's ending. You grow to like a lot, and Scream 3 just kills him right there to open up the movie. So in Scream 3, Ghostface has this whole voice changer thing. My favorite thing in Scream 3 is actually the Randy tribute they do. The Randy Meeks tribute, and he's one of my favorite characters in Scream. So to see what they did in 3 and to see the way they kept him going after he died in 2 was very unique and very, very creative, and something I just loved. So what they did was they basically had a video that Randy recorded while he was still alive, just in case he didn't survive the killings in 2, and in case there was a trilogy, which there was. He filmed this video that his sister had, and she brought to the attention of Dewey, Gale, and Sidney, and they watched the video. But it's funny. It's got its funny moments, got its Randy moments, very well done. Like he's screaming at his roommate and stuff like that. And him saying like the reason why he got killed off is because he wasn't a virgin anymore. Him living to like his Randy stuff. You got stuff like Dewey taking notes during it, and it's a very enjoyable scene. But it's also sad because the ending of it's really sad, because Randy explains that it's trilogy rules, and he's just, while he's explaining it, saying like the odds for one of them to die off is high, and he's saying his last quote in that video is, "For some of you, I'll see you soon," and the video ends with like a sad song playing, and that's the last time you see Randy. And it's like, just knowing that he was killed off, it's tough to see. And then you see the reactions by like Dewey, Sidney especially, and Gale as well. See all the reactions to it. Like it's a tough moment. And I don't know how you guys are gonna feel about this, but I think Roman as the killer, I think it's cool in regards as him being a single killer, because it's the only single killer in all of Scream, counting the new one, 5. Only single killer, which is really cool. But I think they just like slapped on this whole brother thing for him, like him being Cindy's brother. I think they just slapped it on, and that whole story they went with here, where he explained to her like he's the reason why like Billy and Stu were part of him and did what they. None of that even like really registers with me. I don't really care about it. I don't think it really makes sense. It doesn't feel important to me. It feels very slapped on there, like this relationship of them being siblings. I didn't believe it. Their fight and everything was great. Like, it was really cool. It was a very great fight scene for Sidney, but just him as a killer, arguably one of my least favorites, arguably my least favorite. Also forgettable in a lot of ways. But yeah, Scream 3, I do like more than I think a lot of people do like it. A lot of people criticize this one pretty freaking heavily. Even though I do have issues with it and things that don't register with me as much, the whole voice changing thing they did in this was very freaking different, and it worked so well to me because it was such a different aspect they brought to Scream, and it's such a different aspect that the characters had to overcome. Something I give Scream 3 bonus points for, though, they had Dewey get the final shot and the final kill on a Ghostface, so bonus points there because Dewey's my favorite in the franchise. Now we're getting into big love territory. Coming in at number 3, it's the new one, Scream 5. Scream 5 I instantly loved when I saw it in theaters earlier this year in January. And since then, I've already watched this movie in full 3 times. And I've rewatched some particular scenes. I've seen this movie 3 times already, and I absolutely love it. I'll talk about some highlights about it that I love. And the opening scene, I think, is good. I really like how it copies the original and pays tribute to it with all the similarities the intro has. So literally like a modern version of the original, and I think it works really well. Also, every new character they add into this movie, Scream 5, I like a lot. I like their ties with the legacy characters, and I think they're a lot more memorable than some side characters you get. Honestly, a lot more memorable than the side characters in 3 and 4 for me. I think they all played their part really well, and they were all very enjoyable to watch. In a lot of ways, I think this is a better version of Scream 4 in certain aspects. I think Ghostface is even more brutal than 4. Even though 4 has that one scene with the bloodiest, I think overall this Ghostface is the most brutal, with his visuals of the kills, like the one to the character Wes's neck. Wes, who his name is also a tribute of Wes Craven, which was a very nice touch. But he gets stabbed in the neck. Very cool effect that when it goes through his neck. Also, Ghostface, when he stabs someone, it's just like he just, like a ton of stabbing. Visuals of Ghostface stalking his prey, and just the mask in it, and just everything looks very sharp, very clean. The Ghostface killers, I loved in this one. I thought they were a great duo. I thought their lead ups were great. Literally the best friend and the boyfriend of Sam and Tara, Richie and Amber, the two killers, I thought were great. I thought everything leading up to them being the killers was fantastic. Stuff like Richie just being very like there for Sam as a boyfriend, like him saying he'll be with her all the time, he'll travel with her. The fact that Billy Loomis is her dad didn't bother him. Him watching the stab movies was also pretty unique. Him throughout the movies watching all the stabs so he could be prepared for the killer. Also Amber being Tara's best friend, being her best friend throughout the whole movie, and like being there for her, wanting the best for her, this, that, and the other. Meanwhile, she was the murderer who was part of doing all this stuff to her. I thought the legacy characters were great in this. I thought they all played their purpose really well. I thought every time each of the three were on screen, it meant something. Highlighted thing for me out of the three legacy characters, Dewey stood out to me so much in this movie. I thought he was perfect. I thought he was like a 10 out of 10 for everything he did in this movie. It's my favorite movie of his besides Scream 2. Favorite portrayal of Dewey, the character. I love everything about what they did with him here. Just from the fact that, he's a veteran, obviously, but they made him like a depressed version, like him and Gale split. He didn't work with the police anymore. He wasn't like a sheriff. He wasn't a deputy. He was just in his little home doing his own thing, just isolated from everything. And Sam comes to him for help, and he is literally like the Randy, like from the first two. Like, he knows all the right answers. He said all the right answers. He said the love interest. He said look out for the friend group. He nailed it twice there, and just they show his experience and his knowledge very well. He brings up like his wounds and stuff. He brings up the limp he has and just like how he doesn't want to get back into this, but he ends up doing it because of his heart and because of what Sydney said to him on the phone, which was, I know I'm really happy that you're there to protect them, and he just felt like he had to do it. He's just the best part of this movie for me. It's just everything about him helping them, him being the veteran, the funny little jokes he throws in there with the new cast, seeing him with this new group of people, seeing like how different it was from the original movie, from the second movie, and the group he was with there, and now the group he's with now is the much older person in the group. Super, super cool. And him just being with all the relatives of those people that he used to be around. But here's the part that I have to talk about, the part that stands out to me more than so many horror movies, and it's Dewey's death. I think Dewey's death in this movie is the saddest death in all of horror history. I think it was done perfectly. Everything about it, I've rewatched it so many times. I have such a deep love for it. It literally gives me such a sadness in my heart to see this happen, to see him finally get caught from Ghostface and finally get killed off. It's very upsetting. It almost doesn't even feel real. Like, it doesn't even feel like he's actually dead, because he's lived through so much. But they did it in such a good way that I can't be mad at them killing him off, because it was so well done. And I'll sum it up for you, because when he's in the hospital, the group he was with, when they were saving Tara from the hospital, the group they were with had a chance to get away from Ghostface. He was knocked out. And then Dewey, when they're about to leave, Dewey basically tells them all to go, and he stays back because he wants to make sure he could kill him and shoot him in the head and make sure he is dead. And he goes back, and while he's walking back, he's unloading his gun, the bullets are hitting the floor, he's walking, shows his boots. He goes right up to Ghostface, sticks his gun right in his face. The veteran Dewey's been through so much. He survived so much, and he's about to kill Ghostface right to his face. And his phone rings, and his phone, it was Gale calling him. Of course, of all people, the person he hasn't really talked to in years that he loves so much, has so much history with, called him. distract him for that split second, and that was enough for Ghostface to take advantage. Ghostface sprung up, got him right in the stomach, 2 knives pulled up, and there's the blood is dripping on the floor. Dewey has a little scene where he looks over and looks at the call, and he sees it's Gale, and he smiles a little bit, and then he goes down on his knees, and Ghostface says to him, "Today is the day," and he says one of my favorite Ghostface quotes ever, "It's an honor." So it's an honor to kill a legacy character like Dewey for Ghostface. And then Ghostface just kicks him on the floor, and it's so much disrespect to such an icon. I'm saying that in a good way, because the way they did it, it makes me feel this as a fan. The disrespect they did to him there, of kicking him to the ground, seeing Ghostface just do that to this guy that's my favorite in Scream, this guy that's lived through everything, who's brought so many memories and moments to Scream and its franchise, just get kicked to the floor, lifeless body, blood in his mouth, and just laying there dead. Excellent scene. Excellent scene. And what's even just as good that adds to this whole death was the sad music that was playing. It's called Sacrifice from Scream 5 if you want to listen to it. But it shows Gale show up to the scene, and that song's playing, and everyone's holding her back because she's yelling because she knows Dewey's in the body bag that's getting taken out of the hospital, and she's screaming and crying with that song playing, and you just think of everything those two have been through together, and it's such a hard-hitting scene. I also really like the whole element of Sam and her father as Billy Loomis, and the way they brought him back in a unique way. I talked about how they brought Randy in a unique way in Scream 3. Well, they brought back Billy in a very unique way in this movie to me. The fact that he comes back and he's always been giving Sam visions of, like, you know, stabbing and murdering and telling her, and she's just like, I'm not like you, and that haunts her. Basically, all this leads up into the ending where they're in Stu's house, which is Amber's house now, but they're in Stu from the original's house, paying some great tribute again to the original with the whole requel thing in this movie. They do a lot of great stuff in these final shots in Stu's house. A lot of nice little moments in there that I really enjoyed. You know, stuff like how Randy's relative is watching Randy on the screen with the whole behind you thing was amazing. Whole, like, Richie saying, "I'll be right back," and going, oh, I caught it. To them, like, being in the kitchen after the reveal of the two killers, them being in the same kitchen as Billy and Stu, and Sidney and Gale in there again. It's a great tribute. And Amber and Richie are absolutely nuts. I really like the chemistry those two had together in this movie, and especially in the ending. Ends off with the Ghostface killers getting murdered, and Sam kills off Richie, her former boyfriend, and the way she killed him was just stabbing, going nuts. And she gets a vision from Billy, who's smiling because he's seeing his daughter commit a murder, even though it's for good, but commit a murder nonetheless, with tons and tons of stabs. Boiling down to the top two, number 2 is Scream 2. So I love these two a lot. I have a deep love for both of these two. But Scream 2 falls short to Scream 1 for me, but they are both 10 out of 10s. So Scream 2 is excellent. I love everything about Scream 2. Starting off with the opening scene in the movie theater. Love that opening. Everything about that opening is great. All of the side characters in this are memorable to me. All of them. Even, like, one of my favorites in this is actually Derek, which is Sidney's boyfriend. He's innocent, an innocent boyfriend who the whole time is kind of, is he innocent or not? But he is, and he's a great addition to this movie, and he brings a lot to this movie for me. This is also my favorite version of Dewey. This is my favorite version of him. Everything he does in this is just, to me, the best stuff he brings to the franchise, especially his connection with Gale, and this is where you really start to see their bond and them turn into, like, this force together. They're ballsy in this one because this is where they kill off Randy, and especially at this time frame, it was very ballsy because people loved him in the first one. He's such a vital piece to the first one. He was a survivor of the first one, and you really don't expect, because this was the second movie, so you don't expect these big character kills, these big good guy character kills yet, and they kill off Randy here. He has a nice exchange with Ghostface on the phone, and he's buying time for Dewey and Gale and everyone else at the time. but he's talking to him and stalling him on the phone, and he's cursing at him, and he's like dissing Ghostface, and it's great. Randy being Randy, him outsmarting Ghostface on the phone. But Ghostface ultimately outsmarts him, and he gets pulled into a van, and that's the end of Randy. And then you see the visual of his face all bloody and his neck slit, and it's tough to see after how much you love him in the original and how much great he was leading up to this kill in the second one. And it's almost like you feel robbed from this character. He was taken too early in the franchise. Dewey also brings one of my favorite scenes in the entire franchise in Scream 2. It's when him and Gale are kind of hiding from Ghostface together in that building. And there's a part where Gale's in one room and Dewey's in another, and he is in a room where he's banging on the glass, but basically Gale can't hear him, and he's banging on the glass, and Ghostface comes up behind Dewey and starts stabbing him in the back, and he's bleeding on the mirror, and he's looking right at Gale, and Gale's crying, and she can't do nothing about it, and he's literally just like dying face to face with her. And when I saw that for the first time, I was like, no, because I was really liking him, and I didn't know he survived it at that time. But that scene hit hard. I even like scenes like the singing scene in the cafeteria with Derek when he's singing to Sydney to cheer her up. I like those kind of scenes too, because it adds to the side characters for me, and it especially added to him as the good guy boyfriend who was just innocent. And I really like those little types of scenes that just adds to everything. I'm gonna shower on some appreciation for Mickey in Scream 2. I love Mickey as a Ghostface killer. He's one of my favorites. He's one of my favorites, and I think one of the most underrated. I think what he brings, even as like the whole character, the whole movie, he's kind of backlined, but as like, you know, he's in the group of friends, he's like Derek's friend or whatever. But the whole movie, like little details, like he's filming everything. He's got a camera on him all the time. And he, obviously you see that footage later by Ghostface, but he's filming everything. And he has stuff like when like he was talking to Sydney, like he had like heart to heart with Sydney saying we're all here for you. Meanwhile it was him. And of course I have to talk about the final act when he reveals himself. He just goes absolutely nuts after reveal. His speech after and his motives of blaming the movies and everything like that was fantastic. His like retaliations to Sydney and their verbal war was fantastic. The way he said something like, you know, like he says to Sydney like, oh, you're Derek would be such a nice guy to take home to mom if you had a mom. And it's just stuff like that he says in this scene that made him one of my favorite Ghostface killers. So they have a great exchange, and that leads up to Cotton, who is the guy who was framed. The guy who was framed, he's got a lot of anger towards Sydney, but he makes the right decision. He saves the day, kills off Ghostface, kills all of them, kills both, and he saves the day. He saves the day, and it's a great ending. And then he finally gets his fame and his side of the share that he never got with Sydney, that he deserved, because he was falsely blamed for being the killer for so long. So it was a nice, very nice ending. That boils it down to number one, and I'm going with the original Scream. I think it's impossible to beat this movie in this franchise. The first Scream, it changed the game of horror. It completely changed the game of horror. It brought such a difference to the slashers, and slashers were struggling at this time. Like they had nothing coming out ever since the 80s with the Nightmare and Friday and Halloween. They had nothing coming, and then Scream completely just reamped that, and just everything this movie does kept itself different and brought a whole different audience to slashers. This movie, even for me, it's very important for me personally, because before I saw Scream, I was really just a big Halloween fan, like a big fan of Michael Myers and stuff like that, and Halloween, the franchise, and a couple other horror movies, but I was not like and I loved horror, but I was never like, I never dove into it. Like I never saw all these other franchises, saw the beauty of horror and all these different stories and icons, but when I saw Scream 1, that completely changed it for me, and that put me on a huge path of seeing so many franchises after it. Scream 1 even changed my perception of horror, not only the whole game of horror, but my personal love of horror as well. The opening scene in this movie is easily the best opening scene in this whole franchise by far. It's creepy. I think it's also like the creepiest scene in all of Scream. Even the first time I saw it, it actually creeped me out, but it's so well done and it's so smart. It's so smart. Like the questions, the horror questions he's talking to her, having the boyfriend tied up, and just a visual at the end after he kills Casey and she's hanging there. That opening is iconic in horror history, and it is for a reason. You introduce like one of, I think, the best final girl in history, Sydney. You introduce her in this movie. You introduced a character like Randy, who is like the movie geek that so many horror fans relate to, that so many horror fans still love to this day, and he's only in like 1.5 movies, and he holds up to this day. He's tributed in Scream 5 on a picture. They introduce him. They have characters like Gail, who's so people love so much, so interesting to see her arc change and like what she brought to the original. Characters like Dewey, like the goofy cop, who was different than most of your horror cops. He was completely different, and he brought a different thing to that. You got Billy and Stu, which are my favorite killers by a landslide. No one even comes remotely close to these two for me, and their chemistry and their build-up. Billy, who you think it's him all movie, like it's too obvious to be him, and that's like the first time you see like a horror movie play that game of like, oh, it's obvious, like this person is gonna be like obvious, and then you're like, nah, it can't be, it's too, and then it is him. But I also heard stories of people being shocked when this movie first released, but for me, I thought it was him, and I was like, nah, it can't be him because it's too obvious, and then it was him, and then it still kind of got me at the end anyway. And then also with Stu, I didn't even see Stu coming. Their final act in this, in the kitchen, another incredibly rewatchable scene for me, and this is what hooked me on this franchise so much, seeing Billy and Stu and just going nuts in that final scene, and just the way they were able to bounce off each other and what they did to each other, seeing stabbing each other, seeing that for the first time. It's like, holy crap, like these guys are nuts. And it's like how smart they are at the same time, and their motives, like you hear those motives for the first time. It's so clever. It's so clever. You got some awesome one-liners by Stu in this, some that weren't even on the script. You got the most famous, like, you hit me with the phone, and then you got my mom and dad are gonna be so mad at me, which I don't think were planned. Then you got stuff like that were planned, that when Billy was stabbing Stu, like, oh, you cut me too deep, I think I'm dying here. Just all of it is perfect. I love it. It's so memorable, and that's why Billy and Stu are some of my favorite horror characters of all time. This movie's also just so well paced, and it's so entertaining, and it's such a rewatchable movie. Like it's one of the most rewatchable movies I've ever seen. I've seen it like 5-6 times. It's very, and I only saw Scream for the first time a few years ago, like 2 years ago, and I've already seen it like 5-6 times. It's super rewatchable, so easy to watch. It's always my go-to movie if I'm gonna show a fan that's getting into horror. Scream 1 is always my go-to. I just can't get over how clever this movie is. Like you literally have this character Randy, who like the whole movie he's guessing the right things. Like he knows the killers. He's saying it. Like he's saying Billy's the killer. He's calling the shots. He knows. But the best, like most popular scene is him explaining the rules. Him explaining like how you can never get drunk. You can never have sex. You can't do drugs. And he says you can't say I'll be right back. And the way he explains that, like, what horror franchise does that? Like who thinks of that? Like it's on a completely different level. This movie is just an absolute masterpiece to me. It's an absolute hype for me. And I have to do a full review on Scream 1 because I have so many thoughts, but I'm gonna stop it there for now. Scream 1 has the best cast of characters, so memorable, and just all pieces to the puzzle of why Scream changed the game for horror and for so many people in the world. So thank you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed that, a little Scream ranking. So this was a very exciting video for me. It is, like I said, one of my favorite franchises of all time. So to be able to kind of go through this and rank this, maybe I could do it again in the future. Maybe we can see another half and we can see Pooh's ranking, because this is stocks. Maybe we can see Pooh's Scream ranking in a different video of his own choice. But let me know your guys' rankings below. Hopefully you guys like this. More stuff coming soon. I'm having a lot of fun with these videos right now. If you guys have any type of ideas, any type of things you guys want to see me talk about or make videos about, please comment them down below. But guys, thank you for watching this. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you did, because I had a lot of fun talking about it. I feel like I didn't talk about like a lot of stuff that I wanted to hit on each Scream, because I have so much love for this franchise, but that's what more videos are for. This ain't gonna be the only video ever, so I have a lot of opportunities to express this love even more. But
Thank you guys for watching. Horror 31st out.